Hi everyone, my name is Neve and you're very welcome to the second MakeCode for Microbit webinar. Joining me today is Corey.
Hi everyone.
And we also have Amanda, Kaylin and Richard working in the background to answer any questions you may have. So if you get stuck, please feel free to pop a question into the Q&A section and the team will gladly help you out. Something else I want to mention is that you can pop this webinar on pause at any stage. So if you're trying to look for a block and you can't find it, just pop the webinar on pause and give yourself some more time in order to find it. So now I'm going to pass you over to Corey, and Corey is going to take you through what we covered last week. So she's going to do a quick recap, and she's also going to cover how to get started and show where last week's webinar is in case anyone missed out on webinar 1.
Okay, thank you so much, Neve. So well done everyone on completing last week's webinar and welcome to webinar 2. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how you can access last week's webinar in case you weren't here. Okay, so the website that we're going to go to is if you go into your search bar, you're going to type in aka.ms /DSHomeSpace. Okay, so again, aka.ms /DSHomeSpace. And once you press enter, that's going to bring you to this website here. Once you're on this website, you can scroll down and you can see our on-demand HomeSpace lessons. And this is where you can find last week's webinar. Okay, so if you click into our YouTube playlist, you're going to be searching for Microbit Webinar 1. Okay, so if you were here last week, let's go over and do some quick revision on what we learned. So we're going to type into a new window and we're going to write MakeCode.microbit.org. Okay, so to get onto last week's Microbit platform, it's MakeCode.microbit.org. And once you press enter, we're going to be on our Microbit screen. Okay, and like last week, we're going to click in and we're going to create a new project. So let's click on this purple box here, new project. And now we're in our interface that looks really familiar to us. This is where we done all of our code last week and you learned so much. So we discussed that over here is our microcontroller or our microbit. And this is where we can test all our code. We also learned that these here are our categories where all our code lies and it's all color coordinated. We also talked about our blocks of code. So we discussed that we weren't going to use on start, so we put it in our bin. So we clicked it over to our categories and a bin appeared and we could just get rid of it. And we done the same with forever too. We got rid of forever. Last week, and even Amanda brought you through inputs and what inputs were. And all they are, just again to revise, is when our microbit or our microcontroller takes information from its environment. So let's go into inputs. And today I'm going to bring out on button A pressed. Because remember, our microbit has buttons on it, doesn't it? Which is really cool. So I want something to go into button A. So I'm going to go back into basic, and you're so good at the basic category now because you used it so much last week. And I'm going to bring out show string. And we learned that last week, a string was just another word for a word. And it's alphanumeric, which means it can have numbers and it can have letters. Now, I'm after causing an error or a bug in my program here because my code isn't connected like a jigsaw, okay? It needs to be connected. So I'm going to bring this up here and I'm going to pop it into A. And now if I want to see that code, I press button A. But I'm not going to leave it at hello. I'm going to change it to arrow. And you'll see why now in a minute. We also learned how to use our show LED block. And this is how you made your animations last week. So let's bring out our show LEDs. And I'm going to start drawing an arrow. So I know from last week that if I want to activate these LEDs, I click on them. And if I made a mistake, I can just re-click on it and it goes away. but I don't want just any arrow. I want a spinning arrow. So I'm going to have one up on the top right. I'm going to have one on the bottom right. And I don't know, Niamh, where will I go next? If I've done top right, bottom right, and I wanted to spin clockwise.
Well, if you wanted to spin clockwise, I'd face my next arrow towards the bottom left-hand corner.
Good idea. So let's do that. And I'm going to bring this out and one more, and I think that will give me a full rotation on my clock. I'm going to bring this down. And let's see what this looks like. Now, Niamh, to see my code, what do I have to do?
You need to press button A on your microbit over on the left-hand side.
Exactly, because that's the instruction that I've written. I've said when I press button A. So when I press button A, I should see the word arrow, and I do. And now I should see my actual LED arrows. Now, that only happened once, but I want my arrows to keep going maybe 3 times. So we learned last week that we could use a loop for that. So we could use a repeat block. So I'm going to bring out my repeat block and I'm going to wrap it around just my LEDs. And I'm going to make it happen 3 times. And now when I press the A button, I should only see the word arrow once, the string arrow once, because it's not in the loop. And now my LEDs should go around clockwise. And it does. So well done, everyone, on your recap of last week. It's crazy to think how much code we got through. You're absolutely brilliant. But for now, I'm going to pass you back over to Niamh, who's going to get you started on this week's code. And believe me, it is super fun.
Thanks, Corey. Okie doke. So, in order to get started, we need to go to makecode.microbit.org. And that will take us to the home page of MakeCode for Microbit. And we then need to go and click New Project. Okay, because we're starting a new project today for Webinar 2. So just while this is loading, I'm going to give my project a name. So I'm going to call my project Webinar 2 because this is our second webinar. Okay, and I'm going to click out so that my name saves. So today we're going to be focusing on music. Okay, so that's this section here, the third section down in the middle, and it is red. So the blocks we're going to be mainly using are red blocks today. Okay, now we won't need our onStart starter block or our forever block, so I'm going to recycle them back into their sections by dragging them over towards the middle and dropping them into the bin. And just like Corey used in the recap, I'm going to use an on button A pressed input for our first task today. So we're going to do 2 different tasks today. Okay, so I've got my on button A pressed and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so I've got my on button A pressed input, and now I'm going to pull out a music block. Okay, let me have a look down through our different music blocks. Okay, I'm going to pull out a start melody block. Okay, and this enables us to play a preloaded melody. But what exactly is a preloaded melody? So I'm going to leave my block disconnected. So it's not connected to my code at the minute. So Corey, maybe you shed some light. What is a preloaded melody?
Good question, Niamh. And preloaded melodies or pre-made melodies are super exciting because what they are is code that's already been made for us to play an amazing song. So Niamh's going to show you now in a second. When she clicks the arrow on Start Melody, there's loads of pre-made or pre-coded songs available for her to use.
Thank you so much, Corey. Okay, so it's a pre-made song, and I'm going to connect my block now to my input. So I'm going to embed it in here. And we're just waiting for this to update. So what happens when you add a music block into your program? You can see some equipment, some new equipment pops up under our microbit or our microcontroller on the left-hand side. Okay, so I'm just pointing this out because it does change your microcontroller ever so slightly. It makes it look a little bit different, but it doesn't really change anything we're going to be doing today. And one thing I do want to mention is that we won't need any of this equipment today because we're using the virtual microbit. However, if we were using the real microbit, this equipment would be really useful and we would require some of this equipment, okay? Because remember last week when Amanda spoke about the different sensors that the real microbit has. So the microbit has a thermometer, it has a built-in light sensor, and it also has a built-in compass. So that's the real microbit, okay? However, one thing the microbit doesn't actually have is it doesn't have a speaker. It doesn't have a built-in speaker. So if we wanted to play music out of the real microbit, so if we wanted to actually play out of the microbit, we would have to connect up a speaker. So we'd have to kind of make a speaker in order to connect it to the microbit so that the music would play out of the microbit. So that's where our connection leads come from. So these two leads here, the pink lead and the blue lead, are known as crocodile clips. And they're connected to our pins, which are our gold gold things down here. One crocodile clip is connected to pin 0 on one side, and then the other side is connected to the earphone jack, which is this metal part of the earphones. And the reason why it's connected to the metal part of the earphones is because metal is a good conductor, and we need the electricity to flow from the real microbit into the earphones in order for the music to play. So these pins, that's why they're shown in gold, is because they're metal also. So they conduct the electricity from the microbit to the earphones in order for the music to play. And then obviously the next crocodile clip is connected to the metal part of the earphone jack and also back to ground. So it's a complete circuit. So you'll learn more about this in science in your electricity module. Okay, so that's just something I wanted to point out. But as I said, we won't really need that today because we're using the virtual microbit. So we're lucky we don't need any equipment. Okay, so I'm after connecting the start melody block. Okay, and the start melody block has two different sections. So it has this section over here and this section here. Okay, so it has two different drop down menus. So I'm going to drop down this menu and see what it is offering me. So it has different names, and these are the names of the preloaded, already made melodies that are available to us. Okay, so I see there's birthday there. So if we've anyone celebrating their birthday, or if it's anyone's birthday week, I would suggest maybe picking the birthday melody. However, it's not my birthday just yet. I have another few weeks to wait. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to pick Chase. Okay, so I'm going to click on it, and that means that Chase is embedded in my code. It is now the chosen preloaded melody. And over here, there's another drop down menu. So I'm going to drop it down. And it allows us to play the music forever, once in the background, forever in the background, or just once. I'm going to leave it at once, and I would suggest you maybe do the same. Okay, so now I would ask that maybe you pop the webinar on pause and maybe have a listen to your chosen melody, or even maybe listen to more than one melody. Okay, so in order to listen to the melody, we're going to have to press button A, and that will play our melody. So have a listen to your chosen melody. Excellent. Okay, so one thing I have to admit to you is I'm actually not very musical. Although I love coding and I love coding with music, I've never played an instrument before in my life. So that's where me and Corey differ. Okay, so Corey is extremely musical, and Corey is going to enlighten us on the musical notes on a piano.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Niamh. So here we have a kind of duplicate of what our keyboard looks like when we go onto Microbit. So it's going to look something like this, and it's going to have some low keys, and our low keys are going to be down the bottom of the keyboard here. And then we have our middle keys, which are going to be in the middle. And then we have our high keys, which are at the top of the keyboard that I'm showing you here. But also on the keyboard, you're going to have your sharps and your flats, which are the black keys. Okay? And then you might notice that when you take out a tone on microbit, it always prompts you to use middle C. And you might be thinking, why is it telling me to do that? But the reason that is because when you learn to play piano, your fingers, your thumbs, they rest on middle C. So that's where your hands naturally rest when you're playing a song. So it's really interesting that when we go to code, the code prompts us to use middle C. So now in a second, Niamh's going to take you through how to actually recreate a song using different keys that we showed you here on the piano. How cool is that? Off you go, Niamh.
Thank you so much, Corey. Now, okie doke. So we've already created a preloaded melody. So that's already created for us. So we're now going to look at recreating a melody. Okay, but I just want to make sure that everyone is able to hear their music play. So if you're having any problems with your music playing, there's 3 little things that I would suggest checking. The first thing I would suggest checking is your volume on your device. Just make sure that your volume isn't really down really low or isn't on mute. Maybe that'll solve your problem. Otherwise, make sure that you're using the right input so that you're pressing button A and that's the input that you've chosen on button A pressed. And the last thing I would suggest checking is underneath your microbit, there are a couple of different things. And over here, there's a volume button. And if this is red, that means that your volume is on mute also. So just make sure that that's not on red. Okay, and if this doesn't solve your problem, maybe pop into the Q&A section and the team will be happy to help you out further. Okay, so now I'm going to recreate a famous melody from a movie and you're going to help me. So you're going to go step by step through this melody with me and you're going to try and guess what movie this melody is from. Okay, so I want everyone to go into their input section and this time we're going to take out on button B pressed. So we're going to take out on button A pressed and we're going to change it to on button B pressed because we want to give it a different name. And we're going to leave our on button A pressed there because it won't affect us really. So I'm just going to make lots of room. Okie doke. So the next thing we're going to need is instead of picking the start melody block, we're going to need a different block. We're going to need the Playtone Middle C for 1 beat block because we're going to be creating our melody or recreating our melody tone by tone. So I'm going to drop that in there. And as Corey already mentioned, the reason why it always starts at middle C is because that's where our fingers start on a piano. But for my melody, for the melody I'm trying to recreate, we need a low E. Okay, so I'm going to click into it. And again, this block has 2 parts, like our start melody had. However, this one has a piano when you click into the first part. Okay, so we can see our piano or our keyboard down here. And as I hover over the different keys, I can see the different names of each key. Okay, and as Corey already mentioned, we have our middle keys towards the middle, our high keys towards the right-hand side, and our low keys towards the left-hand side. And then we also have our sharp keys up along the top. Okay, so I'm looking for a low F, so I know it's going to be towards or a low E actually, sorry. So I know it's going to be towards the left-hand side. So I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to click anywhere in my workspace and that'll get rid of my piano and leave it on the key low E. However, we also have a second part to our block. So we have the number of beats we want our tone to play. So I want my tone to play for 2 beats this time. So I'm going to change it to 2. Okay, So I hope everyone's following along at home. If you do need some extra time, just pop the webinar on pause in order to find the different blocks and to have time to change the tones and change the beats. Okay, so that's my first one. Now the next thing I want is I want my tone to pause. So I want it to play and then I want a pause between my first tone and my next tone. So I'm going to go back into basics and I'm going to look for the pause block that we used last week. And I'm going to connect it in here underneath play tone because I want my tone to play and then I want the pause. Now I want my pause to last for about 1 second. So I'm going to use the drop down menu and I'm going to change it to 1 second up here. Okay, so now I'm going to have my tone low E playing for 2 beats and then I'm going to have a pause for 1 second. So that's the first segment of my melody. Okay, so now we're moving on to the second part. Okay, so the second part is going to repeat the first part and it's going to add a little bit more in. So I'm going to drag the Playtone Middle C beat out again and I'm going to connect it in underneath here and I'm going to look for low E again. So I know it's going to be over towards the left hand side. There it is. I'm going to click on it, click out of my piano. And this time I wanted to play for 1 beat. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at 1 beat. Now, what's next when I'm recreating this melody? So the next thing I need is a low E or a low F tone. Okay, so I'm going to connect this Playtone Middle C in again. I'm going to get my piano up. I'm going to hover over the keys. Now I'm looking for low F this time, so hopefully it'll be near low E. And it is, there's low E and here's low F. So I'm going to click on low F and then I'm going to click out of my piano and I'm going to leave that for 1 beat also. Okay, so I've low E for 2 beats, a pause for 1 second. Then my second segment is low E for 1 beat, low F for 1 beat. I think I need a pause now again. So I'm going to go back to basics. I'm going to pull out my pause block. However, this time I don't want it to pause for as long as the first pause. So the first pause is for 1 full second. So maybe I'll get my pause in the second segment to only last for 200 milliseconds. So it's going to be a lot shorter than the first pause. Okay. So again, if you need some time to find some of these blocks, please do pop the webinar on pause. Okay, so the last thing I need to do in order to finish my second section, which is from Playtone low E for 1 beat down to my pause for 200 milliseconds, is I need a repeat block because I want this section to play twice. Okay, so Amanda in webinar 1 told us the different ways in which we could get things to repeat or segments of our code to repeat. But the most efficient way she mentioned was to put in a loop. So we're going to include this loop in our code, but I have to be really careful to only place it around my second section because that's the only section I want to repeat twice. So I have to make sure and go up here and I can see that my blocks are after moving out. So that's the blocks that it's going to go around. So I'm going to let go of it. Now I only want it to repeat twice. So I'm going to have to change repeat 4 times and I'm going to take 4 out and I'm going to change it to 2 times. So repeat 2 times everything that's inside of this block. Okay, so that looks good. And now I have one final section to finish off. Okay, and again, you'll see some repetition in terms of the tones. So I'm going to need another low E tone. So I'm going to go back to my music section. I'm going to pull out my Playtone Middle C. I'm going to make sure I put it underneath my repeat block. Then I'm going to click into Middle C. I'm going to go over here to look for my low E, click into low E, and then I'm going to click anywhere in my workspace to get out of the piano. Okay, now this time I wanted to play for how many beats? Half a beat this time. Okay, so you might see a bit of a pattern. Originally, I start off at 2 beats in my first section, and then I move down to 1 beat, which means it's halving, it's decreasing by half. Okay, so it starts at 2, goes down to 1, and then goes down to a half a beat. Okay, so that's important to remember too. And just make sure that you're doing your code the exact same as me, because when you're guessing what the melody is, it has to be the same. If there's any bugs in your code, it mightn't sound like the melody that I am trying to recreate. Okay, so now I need a low F. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to click on my Playtone Middle C, drag it out. Then I'm going to look for my low F, which I know is beside my low E. Click anywhere on my workspace, and then I'm going to make my low F last for only half a beat. Okay. Now the last block I need is I want my last section, which is my section 3, from Playtone low E for half a beat to Playtone low F for half a beat, to last or repeat itself 10 times. Okay, so I need another loop block. So I'm going to go back into my loops. I'm going to bring out my repeat 4 times. I'm going to make sure I only connect it around the blocks that I want to repeat in my 3rd section. And again, I don't want it to repeat 4 times. I want it to repeat 10 times. So I'm going to get rid of number 4, and I'm going to input 10 into that block. Then I'm going to click out here in my workspace. And now I'm going to have a look over my code. Okay, so I'm going to review my code to make sure that there's no bugs in it, because obviously I don't want any bugs in your code when you're listening to it, or else it wouldn't sound like the melody I'm trying to recreate. Okay, so my first section, Playtone low E for 2 beats, pause for 1 second. My second section, okay, repeat everything inside this block twice. So Playtone low E for 1 beat, Playtone low F for 1 beat, and pause for 200 milliseconds. I think that's good. And then the last section, play everything inside this block 10 times. Okay, so Playtone low E for a half a beat and Playtone low F for a half a beat. I'm happy with that. So guess what? Now it's your turn. So I want you now to press button B if you're finished the program just like I am. Have a listen to the melody. And if you can't get it, maybe get someone else in your house to have a listen. If you've any brothers or sisters or parents at home or grandparents, maybe they'd be able to help you. Okay? And if you can get the answer, if you figured out the answer, pop your answer into the Q&A section, because we want to see how many people can get the answer for this melody. So I want to know either the name of the melody or what movie this melody came from. Okay, so you now have to press your button B and listen to the melody and see if you can come up with the correct answer. Okay, so unfortunately, that's all for today's webinar on MakeCode for Microbit. I'm going to now pass you over to Corey, and Corey's going to take you through the home challenge, which is really, really exciting this week.
Thank you so much, Niamh. How much fun was that? I absolutely love music and the microbit. So, what did we learn today? Well, we covered music in depth there, and Niamh brought you through a famous theme tune from a movie. So I think a few people got it right in the chat there. So it was Jaws. So well done if you got it right. Absolutely amazing work, okay? We talked about low keys, middle keys, high keys, and also sharps and flats, okay? So your home challenge, and this is super exciting. I think this is my favorite home challenge. Can you create your own song using microbit code? Or how about recreating your favorite song? So using all of the knowledge that you learned today to do it microbit and coding, it's now your turn to see what you can create with it. And I'm sure you're going to create some amazing things. So has anybody got any questions? And I see actually a couple of really good ones here in the Q&A. So Niamh, somebody asked, can you play two keys at the same time? So this person is obviously very musical. They must play piano. So they're wondering, can you play two keys at the same time?
That's an excellent question and a really good point to make. So I know if you're a piano player, so if you're a pianist, you probably know that you can play two keys at the one time on the piano. However, unfortunately, when we're using the microbit to play tones or keys, we can only play one key at one time because we're coding it to play one key. Okay, so it just makes it a little more complicated. So unfortunately, no, you can't. When we're coding, we can only play one key at one time, but I'm sure you'll come up with lots of really, really cool, inventive melodies with one key at a time.
Brilliant. And we have another question. So someone said, can we program button A to play music and show our animation at the same time? And yeah, you can, but they're going to play in sequence. So you might have your animation first that you done last week, and then you might have your music that comes after that. So that's a really good question, I think. And that comes back to our sequence of instructions that we carried out last week. So yeah, in button B, you can have a string, you can have music, and you can have LEDs. You're in charge of your program, so you can be as creative as you want. So,
well done, everybody. That was a fantastic effort you put into webinar 2. And I can see from the question and answer section that lots and lots of people got the right answer for our melody. So our melody is from the movie Jaws. So well done there. Okay. And one thing I'd like to point out is that next week's webinar isn't actually on Monday because it's a bank holiday Monday. So next week, our MakeCode for MakeCode webinar will be on Tuesday. So I just want to flag that with anybody watching in today that our next week's webinar will be on Tuesday, the 14th of April. And we were really looking forward to seeing you then because we're going to be doing something super cool next Tuesday. Okay, for anyone that just joined maybe halfway through the webinar or joined us this week, I would like to mention that you can go back and look at last week's webinar, today's webinar, or any of the home challenges on the link on screen now. And you will also find more information about the other webinars that we are running currently. So really, that's it from me today. I'd like to thank you for joining in, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you next week.
thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.